Hello, this is Scottish Independence Podcast episode number 130, and this time it's another one of those out and about episodes. On Thursday the 28th of July I went to the offices of the Common Space in Glasgow, and while I was there I had a little chat with all the people working there about what it is that they do on a day-to-day basis, where do they get their funding from, and what we can expect to see in future from the Common Space. It was very interesting, so I'll let them speak and I'll have a wee word with you at the end. So I'm here with Angela Haggerty, editor of Common Space, in the plush Glasgow offices that she's been telling me about. And first thing I want to ask you is, how did Common Space get started? And yeah, we'll start there.
Right, well, hello Michael.
Hello.
Hello everyone. Common Space launched officially in January 2015. Yeah, this is 2016. We done a test launch in December, just before we went away for Christmas, because it was a brand new website that had been built, so we wanted to just check that everything was working before we went for the full official launch in January. So we're a year and a half old, just slightly over a year and a half old. And Common Space came about because after the Scottish independence referendum, there had been the burst in new media that we know about, Wings Over Scotland, Bella Caledonia, Newsnet Scotland, and loads more individual bloggers and websites. And this stuff was great, but it was commentary and analysis. It was always responding to things that were in the news and kind of rebutting them and kind of setting aside myths, myth busting basically, all that kind of stuff. It was great. It was really good at clarifying things, but there was a growing sense that wouldn't it be better if you didn't have to rebut things all the time? Wouldn't it be better if you could just do the news better from the start, generate better news stories, and actually be asking different questions, speaking to different people, and reporting on slightly different topics rather than everything being kind of, I think what people felt during the referendum, very kind of business-led, that the media was predominantly right-wing, and that the agenda always seemed to come from people who had money or had power or had status. So it was about doing something that could counter that. So being aware of that growing demand, Commonweal then I think stepped in and decided to create Common Space. I can't speak really for Commonweal and their whole decision making process up until that, because I came in November I think 2014, and it came into this job and I moved back from London to take it, so I wasn't around in the very, very early stages of Common Space. But that's my understanding of it, was to create a fresh news service that could actually generate original content rather than just be responding to content all the time. So that was the concept behind it, and to do that, Commonweal got in a web developer, a sympathetic web developer. Everything we do is on a budget. It's kind of low cost, and people do things for less than they should because they believe in the project and what you're trying to do. And we had a brand new website designed and created for Common Space that we thought would kind of fit what we were trying to do. That took a few months. I came in November time, and the team of journalists that we had, 3 journalists at the time, Ben Wray, Michael Gray and Liam O'Hare, and they hadn't worked as journalists full time before that. They'd kind of dabbled in journalism and done things here and there, but they'd never worked as news reporters. So I came in and spent that time while the website was being built just doing some training with them about news writing and feature writing and just the mechanics of how these things work, and kind of getting them up to a good level for us to launch with and go with. And so that was us officially launched in January 2016, and it's just gone so much better than I could have hoped for. I'm really delighted with the progress that we've had.
So you've got excellent readership and good numbers? Yeah,
we have. We're still averaging out. I always say, because I probably should get these figures nailed down a bit more, but I always say between 100 and 150,000 uniques a month. There's been months where we've been pushing 200,000 uniques, where it's been really busy, where there's been something going on like an election. But then there's other months where we're editorially independent of Commonweal. That's important to say as well, is that the only way this could work is if it was separate from Commonweal, because Commonweal's a political campaigning organisation, obviously. So we're connected to Commonweal, obviously, because we're owned by it. So we take the same holidays and things like this is just basic kind of employment practice. And Commonweal takes 2 weeks off at Christmas,
right.
So we take 2 weeks off at Christmas as well. So actually Common Space stops for 2 weeks. I know that's odd for a news organisation, but that's just the structure and the setup that we've had up until now at least. So in those months our readership obviously plummets because we're not here for 2 weeks, and there's other times where for whatever reason. We've got a very small team of people, so if the team is out a lot, or if somebody's taking holidays, or for any reason if the team's reduced, then that will hit traffic as well. So there's quite practical explanations as to why that goes up and down. But I think averaging out between that we never go below 100,000, and I would say on a good month we're around 150,000 mark. So we're falling in anything between those two figures every month, which I think is really good. But I want to get it more. You know, I'm still 200,000 uniques a month is still my big target.
Everyone's always looking for more hits or readers or listeners or whatever it is. But I think the unique thing about Common Space is that there's so many different facets to it. You know, there's the policy documents, there's a news element, there's an opinion element, and there is an investigative element. How does the work get divided up there? And also, is the old idea that basically the investigative element is the most expensive and most difficult to do? Is that actually true?
The investigative element is certainly more time consuming to do. So you're not going to be knocking out investigations every day or several a week. We just don't have the resource to be able to do that. So the investigations take a bit longer to put together, but they definitely have more impact. So while it might take a bit longer, it's the most original content that we do, and that's what helps really kind of establish what we do. The other aspects of the site, I mean, the Common Space news component is what primarily the reporters will deal with. Reporters and myself never write opinion pieces on Common Space. That's an editorial policy that I set. I know it's common for newspapers to have editorial columns where they take a position on things, or they just offer an assessment of an issue of the day. But on Common Space we thought, well, if people are looking for a straight news service, then let's not veer into opinion at all for the in-house team. So we deal specifically with news. The opinion section is an open platform for anyone to use. We don't have a freelance budget, so I can't commission people to write. I think it's unethical to do that. There's exceptions to that. If it's writers that we know and I think this will be a really good subject for them to write on, then I might ask someone if it's someone that works well with Common Space. But other than that, we don't commission. So basically we'll publish anything that anyone sends in, and that's been the policy throughout, and that to me gives a good snapshot of where the grassroots are at, of the issues they think are important and where they stand on them. And I think that's how you can look at that. Unfortunately, that sometimes gets interpreted as Common Space's position on things, when actually it's not. We've been quite clear to keep ourselves away from opinion. You got the banner.
This does not necessarily reflect the opinions of Common
Space.
Space.
Exactly. So we're trying to. But these things just come down to misunderstanding about how the process of journalism works, and the reason that exists is because we've had so little transparency, I think, from the media outlets that people have come to know. So we're trying to combat that actively at Common Space through a few ways. The policy section on Common Space is the only thing that Commonweal has access to in Common Space, and they deal entirely with the policy channel. I take nothing to do with it. None of my team takes anything to do with it. We don't edit it. We don't do anything. The purpose of that was that Commonweal was clear that with Common Space they wanted to have a channel where they could put policy stuff that would make policy accessible to readers. So it's not just about news content, journalistic content. It was that trying to keep up that level of engagement that you saw in the Indie Ref, where people were actually thinking about hard policy and wanted to know more about it. So the idea of the policy channel was where you could take reports, you could take complex policy things and try and break them down a little bit more to something that's accessible for lots of people. So it's Ben Wray, who was a journalist at Common Space, moved over to Commonweal Policy after we launched. He now controls the policy channel, and we work independently of each other than that. So we'll put it out in our social media feeds if Ben puts something up and say Commonweal Policy's just added something on the site. But other than that, we take nothing to do with that. So, and then every other channel on the site is operated by the Common Space team, mostly me, because the reporters deal specifically with news.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier you used to work in London. Why did you decide to take this job instead of staying with the job you had there?
Well, I worked at the Drum magazine, which is a media marketing magazine. It covers those industries in the advertising industry, and they had expanded. I'd originally worked in the Glasgow office. It's a Scottish company, and they expanded into London. They've since expanded even bigger. They're a great Scottish success story, actually. And they wanted me to move to the London office when they were expanding down there, so I went down there and I was the media correspondent for the Drum, which was really handy because my job entirely was about studying other people's media models and speaking to publishers like the big publishers, Johnson Press, Trinity Mirror, and finding out more about their commercial operations, their editorial policies, and understanding how they put things together. So that was a great insight to then come into something like Common Space with that, just with that knowledge. Not necessarily that we would apply any of that, but just to know how the industry works. So I went to London. I was only there for 6 months in the end when I was there, and I actually never got to vote in the referendum. I can claim to be a neutral because I never voted in the referendum because I wasn't resident in Scotland, and I thought, well, the spirit of it is that you're supposed to be resident here, and if I've moved, then I'm not going to try and sneak a vote in. I'm just not going to vote. But I did convince the Drum to let me come up and make a documentary about new media in the week of the referendum, because I'd been following the development in new media in Scotland quite closely. And I'd even worked a little bit for Newsnet Scotland. I'd done some news articles for them. So I came up and made the documentary, and it was a great week. You know, just being in Scotland in that week of the referendum was fascinating. There was so much going on, such a buzz about the place. But I came away from it thinking, this new media scene in Scotland is there's something in this. This could really grow, and if something comes up in it, I'm gonna jump back. I'm gonna come back to Scotland. And the thing was, in that when I made that documentary, I had no idea at the time that Commonweal was planning anything in the journalism side. I never interviewed anyone from Commonweal. I had no sense of that at all. And then it was just after I made that decision that the thing at Common Space came up, and I went for it, and that was me. I came back pretty eminently. So I think my boss at the Drum was probably a bit annoyed in the end that he let me come up and make that documentary, because I might never have come back to Scotland otherwise.
And okay, we're sitting in the offices now, so could you explain how many people work here?
Yep, so this is our, as you said, our plush office in central Glasgow. It's not as fancy as it sounds, believe me, but it's cheap and it's cheerful, and it is in the centre of Glasgow. So we're delighted that we've got the opportunity to be here. We've got one office, so we all share the same office, Commonweal and Common Space, for obvious reasons. We don't have loads and loads of money, so we all share spaces and share resources. We've got Tiffany Kane sitting just close to me. Tiff does loads of kind of office administration stuff and just generally things that need to get done across the organisation. Tiff really takes control and takes a lead on that. She's absolutely essential. I'm sitting in Eamon Cameron's chair at the moment. He's our graphic designer. He'll soon be leaving us though. He's moving to Australia. And over at the Commonweal, see, this is how we separate it in the Common Space Commonweal office. We've got two tables, and the policy team sit at one table and the Common Space team sit at the other table. That's how we do it. So we've got Ben Wray at the moment, he's in, and we've got Aidan, whose second name I don't know, he's just started, he's doing some work with the Commonweal unit. And then at our table today we've got Maxine Blaine, Alice Muir and Stuart Rodger, and they're all part of our work experience programme that we're running at the moment. We've also got Nathaniel Williams on that, although he's in Edinburgh covering a committee today. And we've got full-time reporters Michael Gray, who's not in the office because he's travelling in Europe for a couple of months. Great time to go to Europe right after Brexit. It was pre-planned as well, so I think he's got a lot of benefit out of that. And David Jameson, who's on holiday as well because it's July, so he's in France I think somewhere. He'll be back in with us next week.
And how's it funded?
Funded entirely by supporters of Commonweal and readers of Common Space. So all of the funding goes into the same pot. So it's difficult for us to know how many people are funding us just because they read Common Space or just because they support Commonweal's policy work or the campaigning work. We don't really have a breakdown of that. I don't think we've got a great sense of that at the moment. It just all comes in through the same fund, and Commonweal funds every aspect of the organisation according to what it needs.
And just a last question about the media. You talked about the social media environment in Scotland. After the referendum, there was a lot of talk about certain people wanted to set up like a one-stop shop. Do you think that's necessarily a good idea, especially given that we could be heading towards a second referendum? I personally think that it's more important that we all start, helping each other, publicising each other, because there are certain people that are not going to get involved in that one-stop shop, but they still do useful work. For example, if you take Bella Caledonia, there's fantastic opinion pieces. Wings is kind of a lone wolf, but he does what he does. He'll say this is bollocks because A, B and C and D, but he's not going to get involved. Do you think it's important that the groups are looking to help each other rather than pile everything into one site?
I do completely agree with that. I think it wouldn't work. It practically could not work. For the reason